Welcome to Talking Peace with the Western New York Peace Center, being recorded at Think Twice Radio in the home of the future, also the home of our friend and producer, Richard Wicca. Thank you, Richard. And we thank our friends at WBNY, Buffalo's original alternative radio station coming out of Buff State University. Thank you, WBNY and Buff State. And when I think of thankfulness, I do think of our Indigenous friends and actually our friends of color, that people who have been so unjustly treated, and yet still there's so much gratitude and thankfulness in their ways. So that the Haudenosaunee, right now I am on stolen Haudenosaunee land. The Haudenosaunee, or otherwise known as the Iroquois, they start all their meetings off with a thankfulness. Ganonyo, it's a Thanksgiving address that thanks Mother Earth for providing us everything, thanks the people for coming, who make everything possible or who are here, thanks all of the plants and animals that are in this beautiful world of ours, and all of the trees and the water, of course, and the different heavenly bodies, and of course the Creator and the love that animates it all. And so then they say, after that, they would say Yahweh, and then they would say, and then the people would say Nyo. So Yahweh.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. So I'm excited to be doing this show, and especially right now when we have three guests who are all organizers of a very significant and difficult activist, an active fast. A 40-day fast of 250 calories a day to amplify the suffering that's going on, the murders that are going on to the Palestinian people, the people who are starving, the people who've been bombed, the innocent people who've been killed and who are dying right now. So it's very serious, very difficult topic, and we're just so grateful. So just going around, we have Mike Ferner here, who is the past president of Veterans for Peace, who is a veteran for peace. And welcome, Mike.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
And Phil Tottenham. Phil, thank you. It's good to meet you too. You know, we're just meeting now, actually. And Phil is also a veteran for peace. And he and Mike, I think you two were the ones who cooked up the fast, right? No pun intended.
Yeah, cooked up the fast, yeah.
I didn't, honestly, not intended. Last but not least, Kathy Kelly, friend of the show, who has been kind enough to come on the show so many times, even though it's at one of the worst times of day for her. Kathy, thank you for all your activism and for coming on the show.
Thank you. It's so much easier when I'm here in New York.
And especially when you're fasting, right? So before we get into this, I just want us, if we could go around and just, when we think about this 40-day fast, about, and more importantly, what it's all about, which is just the devastation, the just terrible death and destruction going on in Gaza and in Palestine overall. What are the values that you want to think of when you think about that, the values that we want to hold dear in this conversation? So Mike, you would, and we'll just go around.
Well, to me, foremost would be compassion. Obviously, there's not a lot of that being exercised here on the part of the U.S. and Israeli governments. But if we're talking about the values that we would like to see, in my book, that would be right at the top.
Absolutely. So true. Thank you. Thank you, Mike. And Phil?
Yeah, I would say unconditional love for fellow humans, and not to let pride, which is instilled by man and our governments, um, get in the way, because pride blinds us to humanity. Pride blinds us to love. It's love is not proud, and so love and pride can't coexist. And so we need to get back to love and our values: do unto others as you would have done unto you. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not steal. Let's get back to those things and build from there and rebuild.
Amen. 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 Absolutely. Ashe. And Kathy, what would you think?
I think of equality today. My right to have food and clean water and electricity and safety is no greater than that of any Palestinian person, particularly a Palestinian child. And they not only experience a horrifically limited intake of calories and nutrition, but they don't have roofs overhead, many of them. They're victims of sniper shots, amputations, hospital closures, infrastructure destruction, and aerial bombardment and burning, a nightmare. So I want to see equality for those children with children everywhere.
Thank you. Thank you, Kathy. And so, I just can't help saying the same ones that I usually say, which is truth and love. So I think of Reverend Dr. King said, unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word. And we hope and pray and trust that will happen. But the other one I really want to mention, as I think this time I'm more aware than ever before that the values really depend on who you're thinking of in some way. It just makes me, so I'm thinking courage. Courage is so needed by, and certainly by Israelis who are against this, and by us who see our own government, enabling all of this, right? So courage is from the heart. So that love spurs us on to having the courage to really do. And so I'm just grateful for you all, for your courage and for your compassion and focus on equality and on all the teachings and tenets that we try to uphold. So thank you for that. So if we could just next just go around and talk a little bit about the history, and just, very briefly, just for people who don't really, who may not be as focused on the history as some of us have been. It's the other side of the world. People feel like they may not know, they haven't known what's really going on. And so, Mike, if you want to bring out some of the things in the history that you think are really significant, and then we'll just go.
You're talking about the history of Palestine and Israel?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I know the basics enough to know that what we're seeing right now needs to be opposed. I know Kathy and Phil have got more experience and have a deeper sense of the history there. So I think the best thing to do would be to let them take this part.
Sure. Well, you brought out some bits, and Phil, what would you want to tell?
Yeah, I would say, because I started off, my whole life believing the U.S.-Israeli narrative. And 2014 is when I began to do my own research, and that was at the Gaza, what they call conflict, but it wasn't. It was another continuing of the massacre of the Nakba, which has been happening since 1948, when Israel was established. And I just think that a lot of people don't know and do the research that it was Palestine before. That Jews, Muslims, and Christians lived in harmony next door. They were next door neighbors, and they lend each other stuff and they gave each other stuff. And to research and to know that some of the original locations that were suggested where where Israel was going to be located were Arizona, were New Mexico, were Uganda, and then of course for strategic purposes on stealing oil, we placed it in Palestine. And so, it was Palestine for forever, and it was cohabitated. And Palestinians love all people of all faiths. They just don't love being occupied, as nobody would, as Jesus would not have when the Romans were there, and Jesus was Palestinian. I'd say do research on the Nakba, on the documentary Tantura, which talks about the Nakba and the massacres, and it's just the brazen interviews with Israeli soldiers who are now in their later years, and they are still laughing about the killing and the massacring that they do. And I would want to say, after being over there and taking a sledgehammer to the wall, that the Palestinian people are just so beautiful, and they're so innocent, just like the Native Americans were here, and just like we massacred them. It's happening again, and we have to say, we can't do it anymore, not on our watch. No more genocide, free Palestine.
Thank you. And Kathy?
Anything you want to add? I think, the wider sweep of the history shows a thievery of land and a constant attempt to establish what is sometimes referred to as Greater Israel. And through a succession of operations, the Israeli military has tried again and again to subdue, displace, humiliate, and eradicate Palestinian society, particularly in Gaza. There's a very, very terrible line. It makes me shudder to think of it. But diplomats have actually invoked the line, well, we have to mow the lawn occasionally, meaning every now and then they have to go and cut down numbers and numbers of people. And just in my own personal history, I remember in 1991 being in Iraq, and Indian activists said to us, we should be focused on the United States and the war against Iraq, but you've got to focus on Palestine. And so, we tried then to organize a walk for a peaceful future in the Middle East. And I was dumb as a door, I have to confess, Vicki. I knew so little. But over time, you start to realize more. And then in 2002, I was in the Jenin camp when it was under severe attack. And I thought, wow, you don't see worse than this. Well, then the next year I was in Iraq, and I thought, well, sure, you do. And so you began to see this confluence between the usage of utterly destructive weapons, destroying the infrastructure, destroying human beings, destroying homes, demolition, siege, that confluence between U.S. policy and Israeli policy, definitely allies. And then in 2009, I was in Gaza during one of those operations when a bomb exploded once every 11 minutes. And, that was just a tiny fraction of what people experience now. I went back again in 2013. Again, another utterly reckless, horrible attack that flaunted international law. Doctors with their head in their hands saying, is the world going to be silent? And now, we all hear and see the tweets and the Facebook messages and the agonized reflection, and it's an honest one on the part of Palestinians who are saying, enough, have mercy. Is no one listening? And that's kind of a quote from the brother-in-law of Hamdi al-Najjar. And he and his spouse, Alaa al-Najjar, just lost 9 of their children in one sweeping murder. So this massive killing spree, provisioned by the United States, has been going on for many decades. And where will it stop and when will it stop? Civil society is so crucial now. And that's why I am full of gratitude for what the Veterans for Peace and allies have enabled for people, 600 of them across the United States, who've now joined this fast. It's symbolic, but it's one means to say we can't go along as though this were normal. And we have to be fearful of the kinds of relationships that the United States, Saudi Arabia, France, and the UK perhaps, and Israel want to normalize, because that could well mean that there will be no end to the terrible fighting and destruction.
Well, so much to think about with everything that each of you has shared. I do like to mention my dad, who had to leave Nazi Germany as a 15-year-old because he was such a radical in 1933, so very early years. And he was in the Haganah. So he was in the Jewish underground. So it was happening. And actually, I love Khalid. Thank you. Khalid Rashidi's wonderful book, The 100 Years War on Palestine. So when it started, it was the Zionist enterprise was even before the Second World War. So there were already these rumblings. And certainly when my dad came over, that was part of the whole, when it really started to get some legs. Right. And then with the guilt and everything else. But my dad left in 1942. So joined the British police and the British Army, which said to me, he saw what was going on was wrong. And he said that he wasn't Jewish as soon as he was old enough to think, which we know is not true. He was very Jewish. And honestly, he was Jewish all his life, because he never talked about Jesus. His idea of God was a very Jewish idea of God. But the other thing I wanted to tell you is that actually one of the places that they thought of putting Jews, making a Jewish homeland out of Grand Island here, just between Buffalo and Niagara Falls, and even in the 1800s, they talked about it. So this has not been a new idea. And this idea of let's shove all the Jewish people in some spot, and then, the guilt and then the manipulation, as you said, because of the oil and, the history, I also want us to remember that the history didn't start. People say, well, they started it on October 7th. Well, no, of course they didn't. This is what we just said. There's the 100 Years War on Palestine. There's the Nakba. There was all the things that the Haganah did before that. So it's been going on. And so then the occupation, and as the settlers have kept grabbing more, it's just so unconscionable. So let
Vicki?
us talk.
Vicki,
yes. Sure.
Excuse me, if I could, listening to everybody there, I was reminded about a pretty significant piece of the history of that region. I had done some extensive reading on World War I and the aftermath of that, and the Treaty of Versailles. Mm-hmm. And it was right around that time that President Wilson commissioned what was called the King Crane Commission to go to Palestine and to interview people and see what the reaction would be to having that be the Israeli state. And it is a fascinating report, and it got buried. Didn't get unburied until sometime in the 1920s. But what King and Crane found on their investigation was almost everyone they talked to said, please don't do this, bad idea. And they met with hundreds of representatives, sheikhs from various tribes, and just everybody they could meet with. And they received petitions with thousands of names on them from the Palestinians. And so the evidence was more than overwhelming that this would not be a good idea. So, when I read about that, I found that a surprise because it was the first time I realized that had been done. And apparently they wanted to see if this idea was a good idea, and then they didn't like the results.
Well, I'm going to say, yes, we know it was a bad idea. We're seeing the results of that bad, terrible, horrible, couldn't be worse idea. And we've also seen that partition does not work. I mean, you look at India and Pakistan. Partition does not work. And in fact, it makes me think of our friends with the Border Free Center, that our borders and all of our ways of trying to, separate people or claim territory or all of that is so problematic. So let us talk a little bit now. I know it's really been, as we talk about the history, we're also talking about what's going on right now. And it's been coming through very, very loud and clear. So I just want to, if we can just, go around a little bit about some of the more horrific facts about what's going on that people may not know if they're not listening or looking for those facts, because it's well hidden in the U.S. media. It's not many times, it's glossed over, misrepresented, or other things, just because other entities don't want to look at the plain truth. So.
Vicki, it's ironic that today is World Food Day at the United Nations. And I wonder if Phil could talk about what he noted this morning in a kind of an alarm tweet, like we've got to look at this regarding the distribution of food in Gaza. Phil, could you talk about that?
Yeah, so yesterday, as the U.S. mercenaries Blackwater, who are getting paid very handsomely to quote unquote hand out food, they killed 3 Palestinians and injured 46 via gunfire, and not just via gunfire, but they're loading Palestinians, Gazans who have been starved for over 80 days, who have hardly any energy and anything left. And they herd them into these cattle pens to demean them and to make them suffer more. And so that's something that's the undercore of one of our demands for fasting for 40 days is to allow aid in under UN authority, because we knew that this is just another sham. It's just another way for the Zionists and Israel and the Israel-U.S. war machine to delay. And we know what they do, and it just makes them suffer more. So this is a sick deal that's happening. There's torture of some of the most humanitarian people, the doctors, it's unprecedented. It really is. And it's the horrors of having your family buried alive under rubble, burned alive in fires and tents. The horror just goes on. And I just really ask for people to garner their humanity and empathy and put yourself in their shoes. What if they were your children? What if those were your brothers and sisters and cousins and mothers and fathers and grandparents being slaughtered? And we're talking about a military that are testing weapons, the most technologically advanced weapons. So they know exactly what they're doing. For example, when they killed the 9 children the other day of the doctors that would go out and do humanitarian work, and they did it on purpose. And they target doctors, they target journalists, they target innocent civilians, and it's not them. It's the United States, the war machine, that is complicit and is behind the scenes, and the war pigs that hide behind the desks, that write the laws and call for the wars, when we have more in common with our brothers and sisters and children in Palestine than we do with the war pigs.
Of course. Thank you, Phil. And Kathy, do you want to add something to what's going on?
I think we have to ask ourselves, all right, where are the most grievous crimes being committed. And there will be a lot of effort to use criminality as a distraction. You know, you'll hear the Israeli public relations people say, oh, well, people tried to deliver the food and it was looted, or Hamas will steal the food. But I think when you think about theft of food, you have to think about and Phil, please correct me if I'm wrong. I think I heard 600 trucks have been backed up at the border laden with food and medicine, the medicine at risk of expiring. Well, that's theft. That food was not meant for some checkpoint to control it. It was meant to go in to meet the needs of desperate people, forcibly displaced in an area where the hospitals have all been closed because they've been so badly destroyed and rendered dysfunctional. So when we think about war crimes, it is a war crime to use food, to use starvation as an instrument of war. And it's, I think also, although, you know, it's gotten so bad it almost gets ahead of us, but it must be a war crime to use nutrition as an instrument of war. But as Phil described, if people who are hungry and starving and want to feed their children now want to get some access to food, they have to walk miles and miles and miles. Now, don't think that they have even carts at this point, or that they have some way to carry the food. And so people have to be, and then as mentioned by Phil, people then are herded into these kind of cattle containing structures. It's a war crime unfolding before our eyes. And who is responsible to acknowledge the war crimes? Well, that's why it's so important for us to be at the United Nations. The United Nations General Assembly ought, under international law, to be not only holding accountable, but imposing consequences on Israel because of its flaunting of international law. Flaunting of international law by having nuclear weapons stored in the Negev Desert at the Shimon Peres Research Center, flaunting international law by maintaining all of the illegal settlement industries and the militarism of the occupied Palestine territories, and now flaunting international law by killing and burning and maiming and sickening innocent civilians. Never can you ever say that any child is responsible and ought to be bearing collective punishment no matter what the adults are doing. No child is responsible.
And of course, collective punishment is by itself a war crime.
Yeah.
A lack of proportionality is by itself a war crime. And in fact, when I was at Temple Beth Zion, where I am a member, and we had 3 IDF soldiers come when it came to talk about, when there's time to do the mourner's Kaddish, and we're asked about mentioning people who died. And I said, yes, the almost 2,000 people, Israelis that died on October 7th, and the over 60,000, and who knows how many more who died and are dying. So yes, it was a war crime. Yes, it was a terrible thing, not unprovoked. That happened on October 7th. It was a product of all those years. So that is why, the occupation created that. So that it didn't come, it's been escalating. But to escalate that into over 60,000, into we have no idea how many people are under the rebel, how many people are dying of starvation right now. So it's...
Vicki, I think it's really encouraging to be reminded by Mike Ferner about the history following World War I, where civil society was asked questions. I mean, it wasn't perhaps as organized a set of civil society groups as we know of today, with Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch and the International Commission of the Red Cross and Save the Children. But civil society was important in that endeavor. And one thing I would want to suggest might be on the horizon is that when the UN meetings are commenced next month, June 14th to 17th, God bless the Permanent Mission of Ireland to the UN. They just got appointed to a committee that they weren't appointed to before. This just happened. And they're insisting that civil society should be included in these upcoming meetings. Well, if you bring in Amnesty International, they'll tell you it's genocide. Bring in Human Rights Watch, genocide. Bring in Save the Children. Bring in Médecins Sans Frontières, the International Commission. Bring in all of these civil society groups. Bring in Veterans for Peace, and you'll hear a coherent, almost overwhelming sense of rejection of what Israel and its allies are doing. And so I think it's crucial for us to keep on pressing that civil society should have a voice, because we have to question the sanity of Israel and the United States, for two. And also in Europe, you're beginning to see a bit of a crumbling of that terrible wall of silence. Extraordinary wall of silence met the shameful developments we've watched. But it's starting to crumble. And even the European Union is saying, well, maybe we should review our trade agreements. Well, maybe they should do a whole lot more than that. But anyway, I'd be interested to hear what Mike and Phil think about that.
Well, one of the things that we could also talk about is if we can talk a little bit about the UN and some of the decisions that have been made. And we have talked about this on the show in previous times, but you know, some of the decisions by the International Criminal Court and by the World Court. If you want to talk about that, or any of the things that Kathy just mentioned, Mike, and then Phil, if you would.
Well, the one thing was part of the conversation a little bit ago, and that is that on the Veterans for Peace website, if you look at the slider on the home page, we have a window. One of the windows in those sliders says "Bringing the War Home." And you can click on that and see the comparables between a relatively rural county in Indiana and Gaza, and what the square mileage is of the area, and what the population is. And Al Jazeera, on the anniversary of October 7th, on the first anniversary, did a really thorough, as much as possible, summary of the number of people killed, wounded, number of people that were not able to get medical care, the number of ambulances destroyed, the number of on and on and on. How many tons of bombs were dropped. And we took that information and scaled it to this county in Indiana that has a certain population in a certain area. And all people have to do is to take a look at that and see if this were to happen to them in their county, for example, what the horrific results would be. And hopefully that will help bring it home in another way, that what's going on there is just so beyond just about anything we've seen for a long, long time.
And Mike, didn't you bring that information to your court date in Indiana?
Yes. I was arrested blocking a driveway at a Raytheon facility in Fort Wayne. And for the jury trial that we were preparing for, I got a doctor in Toledo, where I'm from, who had lost, I'm not sure, a couple of dozen family members in Israeli airstrike to testify what that was like. And so I used that Al Jazeera report to say, here in your county, in Fort Wayne, Allen County, that if you experience the same thing that Gaza has been experiencing, here's how many tons of bombs would have fallen on your county, how many people would have been killed and injured and kept from medical care, and on and on and on. So it's a way of seeing what it would be like here to a certain extent, at least the numbers. So.
Thank you for that. And that really hits hard, hits home. And also it brings up, I want to really thank Veterans for Peace, not only for organizing this fast, or we can talk a little bit, and I'd like to talk about how you thought of it. But before we do, I also, when I was just talking about international law, and I know Veterans for Peace, as well as the Merchants of Death Tribunal, which I think we all, we've done some shows on it. There's a lot of information out there, but I know the 6 laws that are being broken, that the U.S. is breaking its own laws by supplying this. So, Phil, if you want to talk a little about that.
Yes. Sorry. So, yeah, we met someone who resigned at a press conference in D.C. where Ben Cohen, co-founder of Ben and Jerry's, was arrested. And yeah, so it's a war crime to provide money or weapons to a country that is withholding humanitarian aid. And we know that's happening, and they're trying to skirt it by having it handed out via U.S. mercenaries, Blackwater, who get paid, I believe, $1,600 a day just per soldier, former soldier, to be there. And so you're talking about mercenaries where the UN could handle it fine and was handling it fine. You're finding Zionist settlers laying down in the road and blocking the aid, and then dumping all the flour on the ground and just wasting it. I just want to speak real fast to the absolute vile and racism that is taught in Israeli schools, and not just Israeli schools, but here in some American schools that support Israel, teaching their children songs about killing Arabs. And the misnomer is that it's the Palestinians that are the terrorists. It's not. It's the Zionists. It is our government that are the terrorists. And I don't know what there is to do, because I talked to the deputy ambassador of Palestine to the UN today for 5 minutes, and she was relaying to me that over the past 600 days, they've had 80 meetings, all fall on deaf ears. And so, I don't know what the answer is diplomatically, but I think the U.S. and Israel need to be kicked out of the UN. I mean, they just do.
Kathy?
Well, I think, Phil, I might have read somewhere today that the Palestinian ambassador to the UN also said to you that we should keep doing what we're doing with the fast. Did I make that up?
No, you didn't. She came by. She was very, very supportive. And I asked what else we could do to amplify. She said, keep doing what you're doing. It's making a difference. It's sending a message of solidarity. And, that's why we're here. We're here to grow the numbers, grow the support. And then, and now we have a movement. So what happens at the end of the 40 days, we don't know yet, but we know that we can't stand by and do nothing and go back and take a step back. We have to keep stepping up our actions, stepping up our voices. And like I'm reminded every day, just between the amazing heroes that I'm surrounded by, and Kathy Kelly and Mike Ferner and Russell Brown and Ken Ash, these people that have been, these heroes that have been fighting for peace since the Vietnam War, and again in and Iraq and Baghdad, and they're still here doing it because no one else will do it. And we have to step up and ease their burden and ease the burden of the Palestinians who are carrying this death and destruction for 77 years of the continuing ongoing Nakba. We need your help in carrying this burden. It is heavy, and the more people that we have, and to that point, and solidarity, I ask people to look at what the Black Panthers said, to look at what Malcolm X said, to look at what Angela Davis said, not only them, but Jimmy Carter and the other historic figures, Albert Einstein, research, Nelson Mandela, who has been through apartheid and said that we can't be free without the freedom of the Palestinians. And so we need solidarity across all marginalized people, because it's solidarity or we perish. Our numbers are bigger and we are stronger together, and we have had and we will continue to have your back. I promise you, anybody that is pro-Palestinian or for Palestine, and Palestinians themselves are some of the most compassionate, loving people that you will ever meet. And if you don't believe me, go over in there and visit them. I've spent 5 weeks amongst Muslims in Palestine, and they love me and welcome me with open arms as one of their own.
So actually, as somebody who is also doing the fast here from Buffalo and coming to join you, I never even said that you all are in New York City. So you're all in New York City now. I think you mentioned, Kathy, being in New York. So I'm on my way there tomorrow at 4 a.m. But I think people might be interested to hear, how you cook this up and a little more. I mean, I didn't think the fast means 250 calories a day, right? And for the 40 days, why don't you tell how you came up with this? Because I'm going to say, I can vouch for it's getting people's attention. When I tell people who, especially, and I need to say this too, is that there are people who are really totally Zionist and have drunk the Kool-Aid, and there's every range of people in the Jewish religion that think differently about Zionism or about what's going on. There have been people who are protesting, people who are totally against what's going on, and people who are totally doing it themselves, going out and, taking people's homes and killing people. And there's the whole range. But anyway, I just need to say that. So Mike, and if we can go around on the actual fast and beyond. So
okay.
Mike?
Yes, thank you. Actually, the way it happened was beyond serendipity. I think it was magic. Phil and I are both from Toledo, where I'm from Toledo. He's living in Toledo now, and actually was only planning on being there for a few months. But since he was so concerned about what's going on in Palestine, we found ourselves on a support rally that was a weekly thing that had been going on since October 7th. And I noticed Phil and nobody else was standing next to him. So I went over and started talking and asked him if he was a veteran. And he said, yeah, he was in the Marines. And so we just kind of hit it off. And about a week later, we again magically ran into each other at the VA facility in Toledo. And he was there for an appointment, and I was. And we said, well, let's go get some lunch when we're done. And we did. And I heard Phil's heart just pour out. I mean, I really didn't know him very well at all at that point, but it was really clear to me that he was in such pain over what was going on in Gaza. And he said to me that if he had the courage, he would do what Aaron Bushnell did, to self-immolate. And I know what he meant, because I don't have the courage to do that either. But you just are so sick with what's going on and so frustrated that you aren't able to have some impact, and you want to do something more than hold a sign on the side of a street. And so we got to talking, and he said, well, what about a fast? And I was a little pessimistic that we would be able to make something happen on any significant scale. But I sent the word through the VFP network, and a few people responded. And then the Friends of Sabeel North America jumped in, which was extremely helpful, because they helped. They put a web page for the fast on their website and did lots of other things. And within probably 10 days, the small planning committee decided, well, we think we can make this happen. And it was a huge leap of faith. And if it hadn't been for friends in New York City who helped with some housing and various other things, it simply wouldn't have happened. But I have to believe that the timing of this is just happens to be good. Why we didn't do it earlier, who knows, et cetera, et cetera. But I can tell you that so many people, friends and people I don't even know, who find out about this, one of the things they say most commonly is, well, thank you for doing this because we needed something to do that was more significant than what we've been doing up to now, which hasn't been working. And that's a wonderful thing, to be able to spend some rather hectic days and hours putting something like this together, but to have it received by people whose hearts are breaking and they want to be involved with other people in something that will express their opinions as loudly as possible in a nonviolent way. So we're hoping, as Phil mentioned, we've got over 600 people around the country that are participating, and we really hope that this catches on and it becomes a voice for the voiceless in Palestine. It's breaking our hearts. And we hope to be able, through this fast, to get the attention of people who ought to and do, frankly, know better. But the weapons industry is treating them very well. So anyway, it's a way for citizens to do what we've always done, which is to uphold fairness and compassion, and tell our government it's about time that it did the same thing.
Thank you, Mike. Bill, want to add? I think, are you?
Yeah, I know. Sorry. I just want to say that, it wouldn't be possible without the connection, without that happening. But every single person that is joining us is providing more webbing to the web, and we're stronger together. And we couldn't have done this without every single person that's been involved and made this happen. And it's magical, and the magic continues to unfold on a daily basis when we're running around with Code Pink, delivering letters to missions to the UN, and these serendipitous meetings happen where we're let in to Colombia, which is, they're amazing and so welcoming and so sympathetic to the cause, and Bolivia and so many others. These serendipitous things keep happening. And in regards to the fast and the impact that it can have, a lot of us have or know people, family members or loved ones that aren't sympathetic to the cause and don't see Palestinians as humans. And so one of the thought process was that if they can see their loved ones suffer and see a little bit of it, then maybe we can pull into that empathy and spread. But also, again, it's about building this movement and unifying us. And so, whatever the next nonviolent, peaceful action that we're going to take, it's going to happen after this. And so the more people that come and sign up on veteransforpeace.org or FOSGA.org, you're plugging yourself into that. And because we're not going away. We're not, and until this genocide ends, until our demands are met, we are not going away, and we're going to stand here and say free Palestine until we can't anymore. And like one of Kathy's friends, and maybe Kathy can help with Kathy's last name, but I believe she's a Catholic worker, and she said, she has no more no more words left. She only has tears left. And that about sums us up.
Those are the words of Kathy Breen. And Vicki, I think that you and Mike and Phil and I and all of the others have a kindred spirit in the young reservist, Israeli reservist, who was sentenced to prison. I believe he's now on his 4th day in prison. And what he said is that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has sabotaged a peace process, sabotaged any possibility for a ceasefire, and that he can no longer fight on behalf of Israel, nor can he go along with the attacks on innocent civilians in Gaza. So he was sentenced to prison, and it's a 20-day prison sentence, and that may not seem very long. And I can't help, though, but think that those could be very difficult days in prison and that there could be other repercussions. But I hope he'll be joined by many, many more. There are young people in Israel saying, for reasons of conscience, I cannot serve. Now, there are 100,000 altogether that are saying I can't serve, and some are saying I'm too poor, and some are saying I have a health disability. They're not all saying they can't serve because of conscientious objection. Now, I think we have to deal with the reality that in what they're calling Operation Gideon's Chariots, 102% of the eligible people signed up to serve. And that's disturbing, isn't it? There are some people who weren't even being called up, and they said, oh, call me up. So we can remember times in the history of the United States when people were, on fire wanting to enter into militarism. And there are still many mercenaries today who never tire of war. But let's not forget Ron Feiner, the reservist who said, no, I can't go along with Prime Minister Netanyahu's sabotage of a ceasefire. And, when I think about the growing numbers, it seems to me that this happened pretty quickly. I mean, Mike and Phil floated this idea. I mean, I think about a week ago, how many were we?
Oh, well, we're at a little over 600 now. We're in day 7. In day 1, I think we were barely at 200. So
good to see things move.
Well, yeah. I joined the day before day 1 when I asked Kathy if I could do it for her, and she wouldn't let me. So then I just had to do it for myself. But anyway, because some of us have a little more padding than others of us, so that is a concern. But it is a thing that makes it very real to people, just as you said. And people, I want to say this, back to, we have this problem here right now where people, truth and love. So love above all, but love takes that courage and not fear. But the other part is the truth, because a lot of people get a lot of misinformation. They get fed the disinformation, and then or if they don't want to know and they have reason not to want to know, and then their whole people around them don't know, but yet there are the refuseniks and there are the people. So I want to say that we are about at our end. So if just maybe another bottom, if we can go around once with like just a bottom line sentence, if you had a sentence that you wanted to share, like the main thing you want people to remember watching this? So, Mike, and we'll just go around.
What I would say is do a little bit of work. It doesn't require a whole lot to get beyond Fox News and ABC and so forth. Just do a little work and go to Al Jazeera or go to Truth Out or, any one of a number of places. Check out the World Beyond War website, the Veterans for Peace website. I mean, we have plenty of stuff on there that will show you what's going on and open your heart and see, look at what's happening and ask yourself what you should be doing. And it's as simple as that.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you. Phil?
Yeah, I would just piggyback off that and say, ask yourself what you're doing. I think Dr. King asked a similar question, and I think we can ask, it's been asked about what would you be doing? What you're doing now is what you'd be doing during the Holocaust, during slavery, and what is that? And we have to use our privilege, especially as for me as a white male American, that white settler colonialism is responsible for so much of this. And we are so much more unsafe here because of our presence in Israel and stealing oil from the Middle East from another country. I don't think people think of that very much about, what would happen if we were invaded and we were occupied. How would you respond? It's hard for me not to say that I wouldn't be a part of Hamas if I was Palestinian and been suffering for 77 years. My grandparents had been. All I'd say is do a little research and then join us. Join us on our fast. We have social media, Veterans and Allies Fast for Gaza, and check out the websites, veteransforpeace.org and FOSNA.org to sign up for our fast. Thank you. Free Palestine.
Thank you. Kathy?
Everybody in, nobody out. I believe we catch courage from one another. So let's find that courage to overcome any fears that we have of holding ourselves accountable, holding one another accountable, and yet always moving forward with forgiveness. And remember, Martin Luther King said, I never intended to become adjusted to hatred. I never intended to become adjusted to genocide.
Thank you. Well, I can't thank each of you enough. It's been a very powerful, it's a very powerful show, but it's a very powerful action. It's a very powerful movement. It is a very powerful and overpowering need. So I'm just so grateful to each one of you. Grateful to be part of it. Grateful that the Western New York Peace Center is able to co-sponsor, and there's so many co-sponsors that you have, and there's so many people who are doing more and more and waking up more and more, because another world is possible and we have to get there. So this is Talking Peace, and in gratitude, we have been talking peace in truth and love. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. That is a wrap. So thank you. I know you've all been, so great and so busy and so managed to squeeze it in and express so much. So really.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks to
Thank you, Vicki, and thank you for joining the fast.
Oh, please. Yeah. We'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yes.
Tomorrow.
Yeah, excited. Thank you.
At 3:30 in the morning. Or whenever I have to get up. But anyway, thank you. This is a great show. It'll be wonderful. And it's great to be, with you. So we'll be with you tomorrow. And thank you, Richard and Tom.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Richard and Tom. You were just great.
Yes, they are.
Thank you. Thank everybody.
Thank everybody. Thank Russell, too. He was the mastermind there putting us all together. Okay. Thanks a jillion.
Nice.
Peace out.
Thank you.